How good it is to be here together on this beautiful day. To be in spiritual community, to be aware of this divine presence that is not only all around us, but resides within us. You see, it's a wonderful thing. Today's a wonderful day at a lot of different levels. For me personally, I'm reflecting on, it was a year ago today, first Sunday in December, that I came to candidate to see if you'd be crazy enough to hire me as your minister. But surely no one's that crazy, but turns out you were. So here we are, 1 year later. So it's a little bit of a mini celebration for me that of this journey that we are on together. And so it's a wonderful reflection time this time of year, I'm preparing for all the services because we have 7 or 8 in this month, but also starting preparation for next year and who will we be and what will we do and where will we go, and which causes me to think about where we've been. So there's that going on, and I'm just really so grateful. And I'm grateful as I'm listening to this choir of how you've matured and grown and become kind of rock stars in, so I'm just going to take credit for that since I can't say. Okay, I'll give it credit to you guys. It's lovely. Thank you. That was so beautiful. So I always find this is an interesting time of year for us. I know there will be some of us that say, well, we don't believe exactly that as we're singing these Christmas songs, and I know that. And so I remember when I was new, thank you, Sally, when I was new to this whole metaphysical idea. And it was an adjustment. I don't know, how many of you came from other traditions? Most of us, right? And so we grew up in more than likely a traditional church, given a certain message. And then you find your way through whatever means to be exploring spirituality with a different point of view. For me, coming out of a very traditional church, and I left early. I got out early. And I got out early not because it was horrible. It actually was quite lovely and quite wonderful. But it was also very limited for me. I remember as a small child questioning, how can it be that there's only one way to worship this God that everyone says they believe in? And how is it that we just happen to stumble on the right and only way? Lucky for us, right? Because nobody says ours is the truth but we are the wrong way to God. Nobody says that. Nobody markets that way. It's like, this is the path. So as a free soul, even as a young child, I just kept believing that there's a power and there's a God and there's a presence, and I loved Jesus. I loved everything I read about Jesus. I loved the energy that I felt around that, and yet I also questioned, for lack of better terms, the theology. So I took a little break. Life circumstances happened, so it made it easy to do that. And then 15 years later, took a few weeks off, as they say. So 15 years later, I realized that what I was doing with my life was not creating the life that I said I wanted. And I didn't know how to get there, but I knew it wasn't through church. That was obvious, because I don't do church, apparently. And yet I found my way into a community similar to this, and it began this journey of re-examining, repositioning myself around the teachings of Jesus. And I heard with ears that could hear, or I saw with eyes that could see, a new message that was always there, not a different message. The same message that was always there, I began to hear at a deeper level. I began to, as the focus was more on the teachings of Jesus himself, as opposed to the writings and the stories about Jesus, you begin to find some fundamental truths. You begin to find that there is a presence, there's a power, There is a wisdom and intelligence that is available to all, and it resides within us. We call it the presence within. You see, in my searching, what do we do when we're searching? We start looking outside of ourselves. When we are in search of something, we say, well, I must go high, I must go low, I must go far and wide to find this thing that I am in search of. And ultimately, what we begin to find is the last place we thought to look is where it resides. That this presence within us is alive and well and has been waiting for a recognition of it. This is not something that is unique to us. It is that is available to all people everywhere. Yes. And I began to hear the words of Jesus in a new way, with a new understanding, with a new conception of what he was saying. You know, he said to us that if you will seek first this spiritual dimension, then everything else is added to us. Everything else is added to us. In the searching mind, we go in search of the thing that will make us happy. And so we think it's maybe relationship, or we think it's more money, or we think it's a faster car, or maybe even better sex. I don't know what it is for you. But we go in search of that thing. Here's a little clue. The thing that will make us happy, happiness. You want me to say that again? Did I go too fast for you? The thing that makes us happy is happiness. The thing that makes us peaceful, peace. The thing that, right, you can see where I'm going with this, right? It is not a thing that brings us that. It is the recognition and the realization that that is who we are. Yes. And so Jesus said to us very clearly that greater works than these you will also do. Me? Little old me? Little old worm of the earth, me? I don't know where they got that, but, right? Me? Yes, you. So, that kind of turns things on its head, doesn't it? So we're in the season of family dinners, and so maybe not everyone in your family has joined you on this journey. And so some may ask, are you Christian? Which is like, do you go to a real church? You know? And then you're always left with, do we have this conversation, or do we not have this conversation? Or people around us. I discovered moving to North Carolina that the second thing people want to know after your name is what church you go to. That's a unique thing. Maybe it's all over the South, but that's kind of like, who are you? Where to go to church? So I always find that fascinating. So as we're in this season where we're both celebrating the life of Jesus, we're hopefully celebrating it at another level, because in the embodiment of Jesus, we find truth that is resident for all of us. You see, when I began to approach this differently, rather than seeing Jesus as the great exception, I began to understand him as the great example. Right. He was teaching us how to live a well-lived life, how to move through this world, how to be in this world but not of it, how to rise above the conditions of our lives to know that all is well, to walk in peace, to have compassionate hearts, to forgive ourselves and each other on an ongoing basis, to call forth the Christ that is in each and every person. Those are the lessons. Those are the work. So for me, I realized I had to make a shift. I had to make a shift in my consciousness rather than being at the effect of God, which I had believed, that God was rewarding me or punishing me or arranging situations. And when I prayed to God to rearrange my situations, right? But to rather than being at the effect of God, I was at the cause of God being God in the world. Wow. That I was causal to the fulfillment of the divine, as are you. That's kind of a big responsibility, isn't it? Right? What does that mean? It means that we have this presence and this power within us. And it means that we must work to develop our relationship with it. You see, over and over, you see in the life of Jesus that he was often in prayer and meditation. And he did great work in the world, but he often withdrew himself from that to restore his soul, to commune with the divine, to remember the truth of who he was. You see, I believe that Jesus thought of himself as the living, as a living embodiment of the divine, but not as the living embodiment of the divine. In other words, he was not the only one. So he had this crazy idea. He's having spiritual awakening, spiritual insight, spiritual awareness, doing deep, deep work. And he gathered to himself 12 disciples, 12 followers. And he taught them these principles. He taught them who they were. In Unity, we celebrate those disciples through the 12 powers. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's great gift to us has been their metaphysical understanding of the Bible. And we begin to see that everything in the Bible is both telling maybe a literal story or a historical story or a metaphorical story or a spiritual truth about consciousness. And so he went and he taught these 12. And I believe that if the Bible were written today, they'd go ahead and include the women that he was also teaching as well. But that's just me. I digress. Right? He was teaching those around him about this spiritual communion and the power that resides within us when we know who we are, when we experience ourselves as spiritual beings as opposed to human beings. When we recognize that presence and that power, then we can do greater works than these. It was not unique to Jesus to be able to perform healings. He taught his disciples to do the same. And the disciples, my friends, taught the 70. Again, another number for completion and numbers. So they were teaching how to be spiritually aware and use this power for good. When you place your request in our ministry of prayer, our prayer people don't go and say, God, we're really hoping that you'll do some nice thing for this poor soul. What they do is they say, aha, what I know is this divine soul who is fully orbed in the qualities of the divine, wholeness, peace, love, joy, harmony. This divine soul is expressing that now. And whatever condition, whatever appearance that appears to be opposite of what truly is not so. And in their own way are saying, stretch forth your hand. Get up and walk. You see, when Jesus was doing the miracles, as we call them today, it was not because he said, I see a problem here. Let us fix that. It was, there may be a problem, but beyond the problem is the wholeness of who you are, is the radiance of who you are, and that is what I join with, that is what I commune with, that is what I know, and in the power of that agreement, healing occurs. You see, that is as alive today as it has ever been. But for many, they think the way to their greater good comes through something or someone. We go in search of our guru. We go in search of the next great thing. We go in search of the thing that will bring us into alignment with the presence and power of God. And the truth is, we already have that which we are seeking. So slow down, be still, let go of the mind chatter about all of the stuff, and be present with the presence. You see, this changed my life. It changed my life at every level, in every way. I no longer, well, I won't say never. That would be a little stretch. But I no longer spent the majority of my time seeking the thing that I thought would make me happy. I didn't chase a relationship that would fulfill me. I didn't try and find a job that would make me do the thing. I didn't go in search of the outer. I didn't look for the perfect place to live. I often joke that before I found this teaching, I moved about every 6 months because I was certain that I would find a place that would make me happy. Then I came into this teaching and they said, don't matter. That great line, wherever you go, there you are. So you choose happiness. You choose to know who you are. You choose to know this truth, and then watch what happens. And either circumstances change or our perception changes. Have you noticed that? Those are the two healings. Either the physical condition changes or the relationship with what is changes. And when instead of seeing it as a burden, we begin to see it as a blessing. We begin to see all that is happening in our lives as this thing that is fulfilling who we are. But it does require us to return to the presence, to do the deep work. You see, I believe that it was not that the concentration of... Now, I do not in any way diminish who Jesus was, because obviously his awareness of who he was has changed life on this planet. But the promise, so that was not that their God was more concentrated in him, but rather his awareness of God as his very life and being. And when he knew that he could stand in front of the people and say, he that has seen me has seen this power. Which again, if he were saying it today, is how he'd say it. I know these things. Jesus and I are like this, so he, I have permission to, reinterpret for a new age. It's all good. So when I say that, hear what I'm saying, because until we get this basic fundamental principle that God is not out there, well, God is out there, and God is within us. I remember when my nephew, who's very dear to me, actually has the same birthday as Sally, this amazing little light in my life, and when it was, 4, and he was just such an inquisitive little kid, and he was like, so Uncle Marty, is God out there? And I said, yeah. Is God in me? Yeah. Is God in the garage? Yeah. Everywhere God is, right? Yep, even in the garage, that there is the presence of the divine. We go in search of it and we find it, but it was not the concentration of the divine in Jesus, but the openness to what already existed. So sometimes I think about it, sometimes in our prayer life, we start moving into this efforting phase. And you know how I know that? Because some of you come up to me and say, will you pray really hard about this? I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. I kind of have a feeling it's kind of like, power praying now, right? But you see, that's not the essence of it. It is not our will that creates the thing. It's our willingness. It's our openness. It is our surrender to this divine presence. And of course, in miracles terms, it always speaks about this sort of ongoing battle, if you will, between our egoic mind and the divine mind. right? And our ego mind that believes in separation has a belief in otherness, has a belief that we are in charge and in control, wants to manage the world. Or at least the people most close to us, if nothing else. Whereas the God mind, the divine mind, surrenders and recognizes the presence of the divine in all people everywhere, even when their behavior doesn't reflect their divine magnificence. You may have some of those people in your life whose activity and actions haven't caught up with their spiritual wholeness, with the truth of who they are. The great gift of the spiritual journey is we get to make that discovery for ourselves. We can never do the spiritual work for someone else. Again, when you place your request in our ministry of prayer, they're not woo-wooing you. They're not mojoing you. They're not doing voodoo on you. They're moving into a consciousness and alignment with the truth of who you are. And we're knowing within our own consciousness that the truth of who this person is being called forth, and healing occurs. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wondrous thing. It's a marvelous thing. One of the lessons I needed to learn as I moved into this spiritual practitioner work was that it was not mine to know the outcome for people. It was not mine to know what the healing looked like. Do you ever go into that with kind of an idea of what you want your healing to look like? You may have even drawn it out on a 3x5 card with some key points, just in case God needs a little help with fulfilling my highest good. Oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I've somewhere along the line surrendered, not my will, but thine be done. My will got me into all kinds of trouble. It led me into ministry, but it got me into a lot of trouble getting there, right? So that's why I say it's not our will that creates the thing. It's our willingness. It is our willingness to allow God to be God in our lives. It is our willingness to allow love to flow through us. And Jesus said, so if you're blocked on love, chances are it's not because there's not enough love in the world. Chances are it's not because your parents didn't love you enough. Chances are it's not anything other than you are choosing something other than forgiveness. You are choosing rather than see divine beings making human mistakes, you are seeing their mistakes as who they are and holding them or yourself hostage to that limited idea. Healing allows us to reveal the truth, to resonate at that spiritual level, and to say, even when people are practicing unskilled behavior, even when people are not living up to their divine potential, the Christ presence has not gone anywhere. We exist in this most amazing time, on this most amazing planet, at a time when the world is calling for us to wake up, to have a global shift. You see, I have friends who are looking for the second coming. And their belief is the second coming is going to happen when Jesus comes back and straightens this whole mess out. I'm simplifying, okay, And I believe the second coming, the third coming actually, is when we all wake up to who we are. Yes. Not Jesus. If I were Jesus, it's a good thing I'm not. If I were Jesus, I'm like, you made the mess, you clean it up. Right? Wake up to who you are. live from that higher state of being. And so the work for all of us, because if we're watching what's happening in our world, it feels like there's so much discord and disharmony and all of this craziness that seems to be around us. And if we buy into that, not that we can't observe it, but if we buy into it, if we try and move at that level, nothing changes. Was it Einstein that said you can never solve a problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem in the first place? Right? Some of us do have an affinity for rearranging deck chairs, even as the Titanic is going down. Like, well, I think this would look better over here, right? That's what we're talking about. We're rising above the consciousness that has created that. And so in any time, sometimes people talk about this in the healing process, sometimes the fever gets really hot before it breaks. Sometimes the disruption happens before the healing can fully occur. And so sometimes I feel like, woo, this fever thing we're in. And yet, what do? Get on Facebook and complain about other people. That's the solution. Them. It's them. Or we go and withdraw ourselves from the world and we deepen that connection with the presence within. And then as we deepen that presence, we become, as Kelly says, we become that presence moving into the fitfulness of the world. You are the presence of peace, my friends. You are the presence of joy. You are the presence of harmony. You are the presence of all good. And when you remember who you are, when I remember who I am, and I show up from that state of awareness, healing cannot help but occur. If you're ever around an enlightened person, somehow we feel more enlightened. Have you noticed that? You have people that you just love to be around. You're like, I just want to hang out with them. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything. They just have to be who they are. And in their being, I start resonating at a different level. And I remember who I am. Remember how this worked. Jesus, enlightened, gathered to himself 12, a mystical number, taught them who they were. They gathered the 70, taught them who they were, and went out into the world. And that mission continues today. That's why we have important work to do at Unity of Charlotte, because we're helping people remember who they are, that they are not at the effect of God, but truly they are the cause of God in their life. Glory, hallelujah. I'm about to start praying again, or about preaching, so I think I'll just go into prayer. I'm feeling a sermon coming on. You're like, what was that? No, I mean, so we'll stop now, because I know lunch is waiting. But you get it? You hear what I'm saying? Greater works than these you will also do. If you know who you are, if you live from this truth. So join me as we simply move into that awareness. The one life, ever present, always available. The one life we may know as God or Allah or 10,000 other names. The one life, the source and creator of all that is, that has brought this entire universe into expression, into manifestation. The same intelligence that moves through every sentient being, that causes the planets to remain in perfect balance and motion, that causes the rains to fall, the flowers to grow, and life to fulfill itself. This one life, this one love, this one divine presence is our life and presence here and now. And so as we simply open ourselves to remember this truth, to remember that there is not now, nor has ever been, nor can ever be separation from the one life that is. We recognize the presence of the Christ, the presence of the divine, the presence of love as our very life and being. We open our minds to divine wisdom, our hearts to perfect love. We choose to fully and freely forgive ourselves and others. We choose to experience abundance as our way of being, living in divine flow. We choose to experience wholeness through every cell and every system of our being, at every level of our being, from the physical to the spiritual. We are whole, perfect beings right here and right now. So we are rejoicing. We are celebrating in the fullness of life, revealing itself through us and as us now. And as we hold this consciousness, as we remember who we are, it becomes very easy to know this truth for all those. We choose love for our brothers and sisters around this planet. We choose love for all that is unfolding. We know that we are divinely guided into a higher form of action. We're accepting peace on earth and goodwill for all. We're blessing this spiritual community and all those who are touched by it. And as always, we bless our priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, for we recognize the many pathways to the divine. And we honor and celebrate the recognition of love, of truth, of light, of joy. For all of these blessings and so many more, I'm simply giving thanks, allowing it to be so. And through the power of the living cross, through the power of the living Christ, I release this word, knowing that it is so. And so it is. Amen.